Okay, thanks for jumping in. Let's get started. Let's just minimize this section for now. Section 2 is a little bit different. It's the actual blog articles. So we have our banner, and then below that we have some of the trending articles, or some of the sections that show like these are the blog articles that people are reading the most. The way I did that is really specific to like a layout that you want to do. You could do this in multiple ways. For simplicity and the sake of this video, I decided to do it this way. So we have a div tag, we have an h2, we have a container, the div tag that we're organizing these elements inside of. And in this case, this is the h2, my secondary message, which will be trending articles. Within that h2, I have a sibling element, another div tag, and inside that, I have the article. There are 3 articles in this section, so when I style it, I use a grid, or you could use flex or something along those lines. Don't worry about it if it doesn't sound familiar. But in this case, I have 3 articles in a row, and then I have another set exactly like that in a row just below it. So in this case, it kind of makes sense to create a div tag, another set of article tags, and then multiply this by 3. This is essentially the layout for that midsection. You know, there's a lot more detail inside of the actual elements and the section that give you the style, but we're just going to take a really high level look at this, and we want to match our semantic mockup. Now in the semantic mockup, these div sections were not here, and that's okay because this will help me lay it out when I style it. But if you really want to follow the markup, you can just remove these. But you'll find that you will reach for div elements for times when you need them, when there's nothing else to do what you want it to do. And that's not bad. In this section here, the H2, I have my, I think it's trending articles. Inside of this section, I will have the articles. And I really won't go into details of what's inside the articles, but I do have an image, and I do have a div that contains the other contents that I would like inside that. I use the time span because there's a time there, so semantically just gauging the time. And then I use span tags and paragraphs to place out the content or give you the copy inside of that. I'm going to leave this at the moment the way it is, just to give you the high level variation of this section. And if we go back into our browser, not really much has changed because the articles don't really show up or have any content because they're kind of like semantic placeholders unless you place something inside of them. I'll show you another version of this with some styles without all of the items, you know, fully styled, so you can see the layout a little bit better. So don't worry about if it doesn't look the same right now, or it doesn't look as expected, because we haven't put the details into those specific semantic elements. So the next section up is that parallax image. So it just has the image of the city, and then there is, you know, some text inside of that that's styled a certain way to give you that effect. Basically for this, I used a div, and within that div, I just had a paragraph tag. Right here is where I place my copy. There's a lot of other things that go attached to this div. So we give it a fixed object, like a fixed background, so it doesn't move. And then we do some other things with the styling. So there's no scripts or, you know, code in the sense of functionality ran here. It's strictly markup and CSS, and that's what gives us our effect. In the browser, once again, it doesn't look great, but you'll have this image and you'll see the details. So it's very interesting to see how markup, HTML, just laying this out, it doesn't look anything fantastic until you apply the correct attributes and styling and things to it. So we'll close this section. And this last one here is the blog section, and it also contains the aside. So this one's a little bit complicated. And I say it's complicated just because if you're using something like Emmet, I mean, you'd have to know the structure and the layout, but this one's pretty long, and I'll give it an explanation to you guys as briefly as I can. Inside this section, we have an H2, right? And the H2 tag in our mockup wasn't presented there. We just had a section, and it literally had just the 2 articles, and then we had the aside. But I'm going to execute this code and try to explain to you what I did and why it was laid out the way it is. So this H2 is just representing, you know, the title section or the heading section for this block of content. And notice how I only have one H1 in this entire page. You could have H3s, H4s, and so on. And you can repeat these values like H2s and H3s, but it's not recommended that you repeat the H1. And then within this, I have a div here. And if I close the rest of this content up, this div will be what contains a lot of the content within this section. It's kind of like the container for the 2 articles and the aside. This will be styled a certain way, but it won't show up in the browser because there's nothing that we've applied to it to make it useful for us. I'm just showing you the layout once again. Inside here, we have another div. This particular div is what holds the first two values of the blog article. So you've seen that there's two articles. There's one on the left and one on the right. And then if we open up this div, and what it's really comprised of is, I'm using what's called a figure, and we'll get to this later when we talk about images. And what this does, it just creates a container for the image that I'm going to place in my blog article. Here's the image here, and the caption is what I use to kind of, give credit to the author that took that photo. So you could type in something like so. Then down here, this div is designed to represent what is inside of the article after the photo. So we have an anchor tag. So if we were to click on this title, it would take us where we need to be. So if this was a functioning blog article, this would be the actual title. And then here we could have, some description or the excerpt or whatever you want to call that. So I'm just going to add let's say 7 lorem characters, and that should do it. Each article has a figure, and then I use another div container to contain what is inside of the actual article itself. It's best to see the structure when there are styles applied, but for now we're going to see this area here. And what I did was, there is another div section to contain this item, and it's just because I'm using a particular set of styles, and once we get there, this will make sense. And within here, I have a link that would link to the articles as well. If I wanted to say read more, then this would take you to that area. We have this link that if we were to click on the title, it would take us to the article, and then this would take us to the article as well, the excerpt. If you want it to be a little more semantic, you could even put something like this, like an H3, because this is the third heading within the item. We have the main heading that's talking about the actual banner, and then this one is the city stories. And then within this article, we have then an H3, which leads to another, or the article in question that you're clicking on. And then down here, we have some more actionable content, like a link to click us to the read more section. And I know these look like weird having these extra divs here, but when we're laying out and we're trying to align items or use a grid or flex or something along those styling methodologies that you'll find out later, this kind of makes sense. But in the browser, since there's nothing in them, they don't actually represent or show anything. So if we were to do this, it just kind of looks like this. We're laying this thing out in order of the way the actual blog content is, but the divs don't actually show any content or have anything to do with the actual representation of the items or elements in there. It's mostly used to group items together and for layout purposes. And that's it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like the video if you found this useful. Leave your comments and thoughts below. Take care, and I will see you next time.